Our lection this morning from Matthew includes these words. Then Peter came and said to Jesus, Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times? And Jesus said to him, Not 7 times, but I tell you 77 times. Another member of the church? What church? When Jesus was alive, there was no church. There were no Christians. Jesus and Peter were both Jews. So what's going on here? The Gospel of Matthew was written some 85 years after Jesus. It was written for Jewish followers of Jesus, and those Jewish followers of Jesus were in tension with each other. Members of the newly forming church were hurting each other. So Matthew, when he tells his version of the good news, he has Peter ask a question that could not have been asked when Jesus was alive. This is not the first anachronism in this chapter of Matthew. This question comes on the heels of the previous verses in which the author of Matthew has Jesus explain the process for dealing with conflict in the church. There's a step-by-step procedure. But again, when Jesus was alive, there was no church, and there were no Christians. So Jesus never said this, you might ask? Peter never asked about forgiveness in the church? No. What's more, the author of the Gospel of Matthew was almost certainly not named Matthew. Now I know that none of you are shocked by this, but it's important to say once again that this is the story we have. This sacred story, like our other sacred story this morning, is what we have. And those of us with ears to hear, if we'll listen, there might be good news here. The author of the Gospel of Matthew has Peter asking about forgiveness at church and offering an answer. Doing his best to help Jesus out. Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times? You'll remember from my last proclamation that involved the feeding of the 5,000 plus the women and the children, that 7 is the number of completeness. So Peter is giving the perfect answer, the complete answer. Forgive 7 times, right, Jesus? 7 and done, complete. But the author of Matthew has Jesus expand this notion of forgiveness. That sounds like Jesus to me. Expanding our ideas, our stopping places, our assumptions of where our work ends. There are 2 possible translations of the expansion that Jesus offers here. One says 77 times, which is a lot of forgiveness. The other says 7 times 70, which would be 490 times, which is even more forgiveness. And truthfully, either way, the point is that forgiving 7 times isn't the end of the work of forgiveness. Forgiveness in relationships is more than daily. Think about it. How often do you forgive your partner, your father, your daughter, your friend? How often have you been forgiven by your brother, your deacon, your son? Forgiveness in relationship is an ongoing process, and it's never complete. It's never finished. There's never a box that can be checked off. It's more than daily work. Sometimes it's minute by minute work. This is forgiveness in relationships, in community, in relationships that are built on best intentions, on living together as a family of choice and covenant. The early church faced so many challenges from the outside. It was crucial that their internal foundation be one of good faith, of covenant, of real effort at community. In other words, this passage which has been twisted by some leaders of the church over the last centuries to tell women to forgive their abusers, to tell Black people to forgive their oppressors, to tell the traumatized that Jesus demands their forgiveness. It doesn't say any of that. Jesus is not talking about blanket forgiveness. These words are to people in community with each other, words to people wanting to do the work required on all sides to be in relationship. Community is important in the Exodus reading for today as well. Our lection from Exodus begins, the whole congregation of the Israelites complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The whole congregation. Not just a few of them. This is no low-grade whispering, complaining over Zoom chat. No, they're bringing this out in front of everyone. They're united in their despair. Maybe we would have died in Egypt, they say, but at least we would have died with full bellies. You've brought us out here to kill us, to starve us to death. But Yahweh hears their cries, hears and yet again acts. I'm going to rain down bread from heaven for you, and each day the people will go out and gather enough for that day. The people were told to gather the bread for 6 days each week, and on the 6th day that God would give a double portion of the bread. The people were not to gather bread on the 7th day. Why? Why only gather bread for 6 days? In Exodus 16, 6-7, Moses and Aaron said to the people, in the evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, for God has heard your complaining against the Lord. The people are heard, and God acts, and now they have work to do. 6 days of work. And then they must stop, they must rest, they must have Sabbath. As slaves in Egypt, they had no rest, but now each morning they see their freedom. They know that God has heard them, and they work. But not on the 7th day. On that day, they do something that only freedom gives them. They rest. These passages have been swirling together for me. Forgiveness in community. Scarcity given voice and heard by God in community. Work in community. Rest in community. And as these ideas have swirled, I keep coming back to the word manna. Manna is a transliteration of the Hebrew words for what is it? So all those songs about manna from heaven, they're all just saying, what is it? But the more I've thought about rest and forgiveness and community, the more sense manna has made to me. What is it? Community looks and feels as it never has before. Rest, what is it? What does rest look like during a pandemic, when atrocities are being committed against those who came to our country for asylum or a living wage? When our country is on fire, when racism rages, when more storms are coming? And forgiveness. Forgiveness in community and family among those we are committed to and connected to who hurt us and who we hurt. Manna. What is it? Forgiveness does not mean letting the harm continue. It does not mean saying that everything is okay when it isn't. It doesn't mean we forget. It doesn't mean we're no longer wounded. Archbishop Desmond Tutu has devoted his life to truth and reconciliation. He's written books and given interviews. He worked closely with Nelson Mandela to help South Africa move toward reconciliation after apartheid, including serving as chairman of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. He has much wisdom about forgiveness. I find myself coming again and again to these words that he said long ago. Forgiving and being reconciled to our enemies or our loved ones is not about pretending that things are other than they are. We don't pretend. We do give voice to the problems, and we don't stop giving voice. We don't stop working until change comes. Like the Hebrew people starving in the wilderness, we let our needs be known, and then we work, and we work, and we work. We work on forgiving and on being forgiven. We work on changing or abolishing the systems that create injustice and abuse, and then we pause from our work. We stop and we rest and we take a Sabbath. What is the gospel, the good news for our time? What would the author of A Gospel for Now have Peter ask? What would Jesus answer? Between Exodus and Matthew, I'm hearing some challenging good news. I'm hearing that my cries will be heard and that God will act. I'm hearing that forgiveness is never finished, that in community, forgiveness is a way of life. I'm hearing that there's work to do. And I'm hearing that I need to be part of that work. But my friends, I'm also hearing that Sabbath is important, is vital, is necessary. We must rest. I don't know about you, and I need to hear these things. I need some good news. These days are full of wilderness. I so often feel unmoored. My scarcity feels as real as the scarcity the Hebrew people experienced. While I have food enough to eat, I'm lacking in seeing your faces in person and hearing your stories in person and being together in person, singing and saying and praying and giving together in person in the same place. These days are so very isolating. I am lacking. I feel so often like the problems surrounding us are colossal, and like I lack the knowledge, the ability, the determination to have any real impact. I am experiencing scarcity. So often I feel like there's not enough of me to do all that must be done. I feel and I fear my insufficiency. This is scarcity. And like those early Jewish followers of Jesus, I too know tension. I know hurting and pain in the family, in community. I know words and actions that harm. And the stories that we read this morning, these stories give me hope. Manna comes in the morning. Manna, what is it? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And each day has divine gifts, gifts of sustenance. Each day with its Zoom meetings or book groups, with its words of I love you said over phone or text. Each day with the knowledge that I don't do any of this alone. These stories are community stories. These sacred stories, our sacred stories, are stories we share. There is manna each day in the gift of you. Each day comes with a chance to stop carrying resentment and to pick up forgiveness for myself and for others. Each day has opportunities for work and rest. We are hurting, and God hears our cries and acts. God does something through you and me. Here in this moment with each day as mercies come raining down. Mercies like forgiveness and community, like scarcity given voice and heard by God and community, like work and community and rest and community. Manna. What is it? What is it for you? What manna are you finding with each new day? What good news are you writing? I pray that you're finding divine gifts, that you're feeling this community, that you're engaging in work for justice. I pray that you're forgiving and being forgiven. And I pray that you're resting, that you're finding ways for Sabbath rest. Amen.